Hey everybody, welcome back to Gun Tote Minnesota, and today I have the Riton 7 Conqueror here. I've already taken it out of the box, but I'm just going to tell you that this box, inside, some of the things that are going to come with it that you need. First of all, you do have a QR code. You have some of the necessary information if you have customer service issues, warranty issues, or you want to read the manual perhaps. There's a QR code to get you to the places you need to be. That's going to come inside your box. It's going to come with additional throw lever bases here. So for different heights, extensions, and then you can actually put it in more than one location. So you could just move this over, or you can change the heights. It's going to come with multiple different throw lever accessories there. So that's neat. And then also in the package, you're going to have your Riton branded lens cloth. The very few tools that you'll need for this, you don't need many tools at all for modern scopes, and an additional turret cap. This turret housing, the reason that they send two is because this one has a zero stop installed, and you can actually see you have a revolution indicator right there on top. So when you get past 10, that pops up. And then on the other one here, this doesn't have a revolution indicator for that second rev, but it does have the ability to go up or down uninhibited other than the full range of travel. So it'll give you that full range, and there's really no other difference than it doesn't have a zero stop. The optic itself is an incredible optic. I think this is going to be a really fun optic to review, especially on my favorite air rifle right now. All right, I've got it all mounted up. This is my HW97 famous, it's HW97K. This is a famous air gun for just being really, really high quality. It's kind of an expensive Springer. It also has a relatively, noticeable reverse recoil. This optic is advertised as being capable to handle 1200 Gs, which is really high. That's higher. Most, are 800 to 1000. That's their rating. This is up to 1200. It's a very robust scope. And in addition to that, it has a reverse recoil rating, which is the most important part. If you weren't aware, the reverse recoil is more important than just the standard recoil rating that you would get of shockproof or whatever. This has such an abusive reverse recoil from that piston and the spring rather going back and forth. The rifle itself is very abrupt, and I have had high quality $1,000, $1,500 plus optics that were rated for about 1100, but they weren't recoil resistant to the reverse recoil or that vibration that's unique to spring piston air guns. So you need a super robust, well-built, good epoxies, good glass, everything has to be inserted well, a little bit thicker tube sometimes. You need something that can hold up to that. Otherwise, turrets break, glass breaks. I've had lenses literally pop out, just pop right out of expensive high-end optics, or at least mid-tier optics. And so this, if it can hold up to the Y-Rouse recoil, it's going to do just fine. I should say more like reverse recoil or that vibration. Then I'm going to be really impressed. And I think it does, because they're advertising this line specifically aimed at long-range rifle shooters, competitive shooters, as well as the air gun industry. And so I'm excited to put this to the test. The Y-Rouse itself is pretty stock. I do have a buck rail device on the end here. These I have lots of videos on, and these are amazing. This is buck rail again. I am an affiliate with buck rail, so I'll throw that out there for full transparency, but they're on all of my personal air guns, you'll notice on the channel, and I'm a big supporter of them. They are a sponsor of the channel, but they work, so that's why they're on my guns. And especially this one, which is a $700 air gun, and I'm putting on top a $1,600 MSRP optic. It is sitting in Sunway Photo medium rings. I like using the Sunway Photo medium rings because they've held zero really well in hot and cold. I go back and forth a lot in hot and cold. And then additionally, the bubble level in the back is in the base of this one. So sometimes when I'm leveling an optic, or if I just don't have a bubble level inserted, then I can kind of cheat and look underneath here, which is a nice feature. Let's go ahead and get a couple shots on paper, get it zeroed, and see what the glass clarity is like. And thankfully this has a parallax. It goes down to 20 yards or so. I'm going to start off at 50 and see what we get. Going over some of the features, first you'll notice it does come with flip caps, and they're decent quality flip cap. I like to run flip caps because either dirt, wind, blows some snow in sometimes, and I like to be able to close up and seal them up. Bikini covers have their place. They can do some good things, but I actually prefer flip caps, especially if they can handle the cold, and so far these have been doing just fine. You can go ahead and remove that to show you kind of a nice diopter adjustment here. It's unique. It's actually a little different than others. It's kind of beveled, and it just feels kind of soft around here. I like that. Very, very well machined, not sloppy, and lots of range of travel. So if you need correction for your eyes, you're going to have plenty of correction with this guy right here. And again, that's just for the reticle adjustment. That's not going to make your image necessarily a better image, but it will help with the reticle itself. Moving on, I want to mention this is a 3 to 24 by 56. So let's start with the 3 power. Here at 3 power, moving the magnification ring, it's nearly effortless. It's nearly effortless. And it's cold out, you know, it's under 20 degrees right now. So usually things stiffen up a little bit. Usually they're more difficult to move, but this is both smooth and it's not high on the resistance factor. This is right in the sweet spot. It's exactly where I want it to be. I've been able to use this with gloves, even without this on there. There's enough texture and grip here. It has kind of a uniform, consistent texture between all the dials and knobs and levers, and it's aggressive enough. The way that this is milled, it's got just a bit of an edge, a bit of a catch to it. Not uncomfortable at all, as some optics actually are. It's just smooth. Easy to move back and forth. But if your hands are slippery, if it's wet, snowy out, that kind of thing definitely happens, you'll still be able to grab onto that. And what's nice is if you wanted to remove this, if you had an issue of this running into a bolt knob, there's other options. I haven't run into that issue, but there's other options for the mag lever assist here. You can take that little tower off. You could just put in a filler, which would be more similar to this the size right here, or you could put in a slightly lower one. All those are good options. I like this one the best though. Right here, it doesn't run into anything that is going to be complicated for me. The only thing that would be an issue is if I had it on the next position over here. If it was on this one, I would have a bit of a clearance issue because I'm only using medium rings, and I think it would run into the spring housing, the rear spring housing on this particular rifle. But easy enough. I just took that out, put in the base plate, and installed it in this position right here. Looking at the illumination knob, this one is really, really tactile. Again, it has that same texture on it. It's got 6 settings with off in between. This one's super tactile. I can hear it. It's very audibly tactile. And I can just feel it's a solid stop. There's no mush in there at all. This just feels like how all of them should be. They should be snappy like that. They should be responsive. They shouldn't have over travel or backlash. Yeah, that's done really, really well, actually. As I previously mentioned, this goes down to 20 yards for parallax, which makes it an ideal candidate for air guns. It technically goes a little bit below the number 20, and as far as my eye can tell, it definitely can correct parallax as close as 20. Maybe a bit closer, but I would say 20 is the first starting marker. And you'll notice it doesn't have more numbers in there. It just has a broadening line, and that is probably the future. Most optics companies are going to be doing something like that, right up to infinity there, just because it's not supposed to be something where you just look at a number and leave it there. When you correct parallax error, you're doing it specifically for your eye and for the conditions you're in with the optic that you have. And calibrating this little dial would be a very tricky process, probably, not to mention a lot of people use them wrong, or their eyes aren't the same, and there could be so many issues with that. So don't be surprised when you see modern optics, especially high quality optics, moving away from putting additional numerical indicators on the parallax knob. By the way, the smoothness of this thing, oh my gosh, this is just glass. This is done really, really well. If any other optics manufacturers are watching this video, maybe grab one of these. This is what people are looking for. It's got a proper amount of resistance. It's not going to move under recoil. Just barely firm enough to keep it in place, but smooth enough that I can finesse it and go back and forth just a little bit without it being jerky. Some optics, there's kind of like a jerky parallax knob, and that's really obnoxious, especially with an air gun when you're trying to take fine shots. Yeah, that's really nice. Well done. Very well done on the parallax knob. Going up to the turrets now. All right, for resetting the turret, all I have to do is loosen up these Allens. It's a pretty simple reset. and I've already done this before, so it's on 0. Just showing you the inside here. Lift that off, and all you have to do is line up that V. If you've accidentally set your second revolution, you can just pop it out of there so it's not stuck in the vane, and make sure it goes the right direction. Line it exactly back up on 0, tighten them up, and you're set. These turrets have a few things that I really, really like, and I wish more optics companies would do. Let's start with the numerical indicators here. So you do have a witness line underneath. Hopefully you can see that there. And as I click, first of all, every click is very tactile. I can both hear and feel it. It starts and it stops, and there's no backlash. I mean, I can try to manufacture some, maybe. I can hardly even manufacture any. No. Any movement is the whole optic moving around. It's not actually the turret. There's no slop in there. This is done really well. All right, that's number one. I like that. It gives a lot of confidence. And it's just frustrating when you spend over $1,000 on optic. This tends to be on sale right around there. You have to have some good quality turrets, and this one definitely does. The zero stop itself is very firm. It's a mechanical zero stop, so let's just run that. Very firm, stops right on the witness line to my eye. Maybe you're slightly off center, so maybe it doesn't look like it to you, but for me, each individual click, each 1/10 of a mil is exactly on that witness line, or the numerical indicator. Feels really, really good. Rugged turrets. Kind of a thuddy thing more than a high-pitched clicky thing, and that doesn't bother me at all. That's solid. I can trust these as far as the feel goes. We'll have to do an actual tracking test to see what the tracking or return to zero is. I like that the calibration, or the way that they've set these up, is to have an increasing line as you get up to the 5th 10th right there. The 5th 10th marker is big, and then you're going to drop back down for 6. It's just a nice way of separating each individual click and differentiating. When you're in a match and you're under pressure, you know, it's amazing how when you hear that beep, everything goes to mush. And it's just nice to be able to not have to count little tiny lines, because sometimes you might be going back and forth so much, especially in NRL 22, where you're not shooting very far. You might shoot out to a couple hundred yards, a few hundred yards perhaps, but you're going to have a lot of variability inside of that distance, and you're going to have a lot of data changes. So you might have 5 different positions, maybe more, and your data is going to change each time. So counting clicks or being very confident and affirmative where you're at in your revolution is important, which is where this comes in right here on top. Once you get past, let's go up to 9.9, and you're going to start seeing I'm about 9.8, 9.9, and at 10 mils, this pops up fully, and you can feel it. At 9.9, it just barely starts to go. 9.8, hardly any. 9.7, it's still flush, but you can kind of see it there. I think there's enough lighting. You can tell where it pops up, and now I can both feel it and see it because it's shiny, it's reflective. So that's my second revolution, and I'm going to be stopped at 19.5. Let's see, 19.6, I'd say. I'm stopped at about 19.6. If that's not enough elevation for the rifle you're shooting, it would be easy to do. You just take this turret off, and you can put on the one without a revolution indicator and without a zero stop. These turrets are excellent. One thing that might be unique about this optic compared to optics you've used in the past, so this does have the revolution indicator and the zero stop installed. That's the cap I went with here. And also on the windage itself has a stop. So I'm at 0 right here, and as I'm going, it stops me at about 4.5, 4.6, somewhere in there on the windage in both directions. About 4.8 on the other one. Let's go back and test that again. Yeah, it's pretty close. So it's going to stop you from over-rotating. One of the benefits of that is, first of all, I don't dial for windage very often. Maybe a little bit. Most of the time I try to hold, and I like reticles that have enough lateral hold and movement that I can base it out of my reticle. But when I have to, and I dial, I sure hope I'm not dialing more than 5 mils of windage. This is plenty enough to get away with. And again, it has the same pattern you're going to see on the elevation turret, so you can know exactly where you're at. And obviously it's got a 56mm objective. With these particular rings, that's as close as I can cut it to this particular breech. And I'm going to get a lot of light collection out of that, as well as probably just a better image in evening time, early morning time. I think overall this is going to help a lot, and I like to see a 56mm objective on something that's in that 3 to 24 power. I don't have to have it, and there are models of Riton that have a smaller objective if you don't need that, but this is one of their more excellent optics. It has really, really good glass quality. I'm super happy about that, and I want the 56mm objective with this. I just want the best of all that they have, and this optic is probably going to be that for me. All right, let's talk a little bit about the image as well as the reticle, illumination, some of those features. So I'm going to start by telling you that there are no artifacts in this glass that I can tell. There's nothing popping out that shouldn't be there. There are no specks of dust or any flakiness, anything like that I noticed. It seems like the application of the coatings was really even, and I don't see a bunch of little bubbles or anything that just shouldn't be there in the first place. It looks like it was done really, really well. That being said, I'm using a device where I install my phone camera, and then it looks through another set of lenses and then through the optic itself so that I can record like this. And that device itself is not perfect. It does have, it's secondhand, so it has a few artifacts in it, maybe a scratch, and I should really take it apart and clean out the internals of my recording device, just because the lenses here are clearly not perfect. So if you see anything and you think it looks imperfect, honestly, it's just the recording device and the camera, the phone camera quality. It's not the scope. I've been really, really happy with the quality of the image. Just briefly, the main points, things like color, contrast, they're excellent, just excellent, really excellent. With my camera, you see probably what looks to be a distortion as you reach the edges of the glass. But when I look through this optic, I do not see heavy distortion on the edges of the reticle towards the bottom of the glass, and it looks really good all the way down the reticle. I've never had issues with that, and I have been dialing this to the max so I can shoot at 200 yards, a little past 200 yards with this optic, which I have about 17.5 in the turrets, and then I'm holding 10 in the reticle. So I'm right down there towards the end of the reticle, and I'll show you that in a second. But the glass quality, the image, the contrast, light has all been superb. I really don't have that much to say about it in this particular optic. Sometimes when optics are just not that great, but they're not that horrible, I actually have more to say because I want to talk about where they fit. But this one is just really good. And so being that it is a high quality piece of glass, I have a lot of hope for anybody who's going to use this in an ELR context, long range shooting in general, PRS, as well as airgun shooting, what I'm doing here. You're not going to have issues with it. I think the glass quality is superb, and I actually think the price is really competitive now that I've been able to get a good feel for light transfer through here, lack of chromatic aberration, just the lack of distortion around any part, and the functionality of the reticle. Let's talk about the reticle, starting off with the illumination and the reticle. So here is level 5. Here's level 6. We're looking at 50 yards right here, which isn't very far away, obviously. I'm looking into a fairly well-lit area. And I would say the illumination is very good. It's bright. It's really bright. So contrast-wise with illumination, you can see, it almost bleeds out too much right here. A little too much. I don't think it's a bad illumination. I don't think they did it over the top. In a sunny environment, competing with the sun, this would clear up and it would probably cleanse the image just slightly. I'm gonna go ahead and change the magnification here. Try not to move this around too much. So there you get a shot of the full reticle. Now my preference personally is generally that with reticles, the illumination would just be center dot or center tree, something like that. This, though, there is an advantage, and let me show you what the advantage is of illuminating all of the reticle. First of all, if you're actually going to use a holdover, sure. I guess there's an advantage there. And I'll just back it down to, so I'm about, 5.5 power. I'm at 5.5 power right there. And I suppose if you're looking at close distances, having that reticle illuminated, it's kind of like a red dot. You can see that the fat lines that are not illuminated off to the horizontal sides, the left and the right, and then also underneath, those lines go from thick to thin, and it kind of draws your eye to the center where the reticle is and the tree and the stadia. It works for me, guys, especially because they did a brilliant thing here to give you a lot of low-end capability. The stadia, the holdover, there's a double line. Let me go ahead and magnify it again. Let's bump that back up. That double line in the center of the reticle, which goes all the way down throughout the mills, that center line almost works as if it were a typical dual point or a cross reticle, something that's duplex feeling. It almost functions that way. So those wider lines that are below and then also horizontal, they run into the lines as far as your vision is concerned. And so that bar underneath and those horizontal lines, it kind of makes it feel almost like a duplex reticle when it's on lower power. And if you bump up that illumination, you're going to be able to place that really quickly and have decent contrast in those scenarios. So that's on level 6. I'll go to 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And I can still pick it up on 2 pretty decently, even looking into a well-lit area. The clicks are so tactile on illumination. This is a really well done illumination as far as the dial, the tactile nature, the way that they set it up. And even though I might prefer to have more of just a dot or the center of the reticle illuminated generally, I see what they're doing here and it works, and a lot of people, I'm going to say, are going to love this. I think it was well thought out, and I completely understand that this is probably a good portion of the market that wants the reticle illuminated fully and in this way. And not a big critique on that, actually, even though it's not exactly the way I typically set my optics up or would look for it. Most people, I think, are going to want it this way. A couple other things I wanted to comment on. Now, the reason that it looks slightly distorted in the image to the sides is only because of my camera. It's not that way with the eye, and in fact, if I back this off a little bit, you'll see that those numbers in the stadia become much more sharp and in focus, but then when I increase here, it's just the way that the camera works. I'm going to say that when I've been shooting in more like long-range application, outside, outdoors, I really don't notice darkening of the image very much. Slightly here, I'm getting slightly darker image. And the optic is still mounted to my rifle. That's why it's moving around a little bit there on me. Yeah, I don't notice much darkening. It's just a little bit. And that's right there is up to 24 power. This is really excellent glass, guys. Great light collection capability. Reminds me a lot of the Blackhound 3-24 that I reviewed, which is also a superb optic. Obviously different reticles and some other variants between the two, but this stadia right here, it would be my preference versus the Blackhound kind of duplex with a holdover modified tree feel. This is definitely more my style, my type for the kind of shooting I do. Both of them have an excellent image though, and I would not complain about darkening of the image at 24, but there will be any optic that has this range, going from a 3-24, there will be some. And even with that 56mm objective, it can't do a perfect job, but it will do the job that I need it to. I'm very confident, and it's probably very competitive against, most of what I see in this price point. I think a couple competitors are charging in the $2,000, maybe $2,200 price point to get the same image quality with the same magnification and probably less features. So this is competitive. All right, taking a look at the reticle, I can see all of the tree, and I could use it in real life right there, all the way down to that 12th mil, and I'm on about 11.8 power, we'll call it, just short of 12. If I go to 12, I can still see the 12th mil, which is really cool. Excellent field of view, wide enough there that it's going to do. It's going to suffice for me. For 12 power, that's pretty good, actually. So 12 mils of holdover on 12 power, that'll get you to 1,000 just fine, fellas. And the nice thing about that is that on 12 power, the reticle, of course, is functional. I would say the reticle is functional. It's visible, it's functional on low power because of the way that they did those horizontal and vertical lines and the big vertical line going up the middle there. It's useful, it's capable on low power, but as far as the actual holdovers, now, I would say 12 power, making sense of the data there and those dots, I definitely can do it on 12 power. I could probably do it on 8 power as long as lighting is decent. But if lighting is poor, I can do it on 12 power with not a lot of issues. And, you know, I need to have some sort of contrast in the background. If I have a lot of weeds and rocks and things that are going to blend in, it's a little harder on 8 power. But 10 and 12, definitely doable. There's a chevron kind of feature there. This is so unique, and I want to bump it up to full power here to talk about the chevron for a moment. Now the chevron, at first when I was looking at this online, I thought to myself, is that going to obstruct field of view? Is there going to be some sort of satisfactory reason why they put that in there? Let me change my camera a little bit here. Why did they put the chevron in there on the peak? And of course, low end power, it has a purpose. It makes sense with that big bar in the middle, all those little breakups. But you know what? It didn't obstruct field of view. I thought it would. I thought it would be kind of frustrating, and it definitely didn't. The other thing is, I'm not a huge fan of chevron optics. There's I guess a famous company, a well-known company right now, a brand that uses chevrons in a lot of the reticles, and I just don't like those optics, and I don't like those particular reticles they have, and for some reason, this isn't like those. So this one right here feels very different to me. I'm going to put it on a white piece of paper here. It feels very different, and I think it's because they still are able to retain the center dot above the chevron. And it just seems natural. It's very easy for me to read. I did not struggle with picking up what the indicated values were. I could pretty much guess them out before I ever looked at a schematic or any chart explaining the reticle itself, the holdovers, the values. Just seems very simple, straightforward to me. So whether I was at extended distance or shooting closer, it did not obstruct, but I was able to get really precise, very small holds because of that center dot. And the center dot is big enough that my eyes can pick it up, as well as those horizontal lines, which are important. You can see the horizontal lines. If I look at the center dot and I'm going to the right, I've got 2, 4, 6, 8, and then 10 is a large line indicator. That's exactly what I would expect. Going vertical above, the hold under is very important to me, and there are 4 mils of hold under above the standard reticle there that you're typically going to use. So that's useful because sometimes you do hit high, sometimes you want to range with that, and it's an kind of unobstructed portion of the reticle. It's very simple, it's just those dots, and so you can range with that to some degree, and you can definitely make corrections based off of that. So if I feel like the bottom portion of the reticle, if somebody felt that it was just too busy or it was too hard to gauge a correction and make your measurement with that, you could easily use the lines above in the hold under portion. I think that's probably a versatile part of the reticle for a lot of people. They don't know how to use that very well, but I actually use mine every single time I shoot long range. In most optics, actually, I use the hold under portion as a ranging feature. And you'll notice that a lot of decent optics do have a hold under portion. Sometimes they'll even go down to 10th mil indicators so that you can get a very fine measurement. They just try to keep it out of the center of the glass, out of the main portion field of view, so you can see well. And this one does not obstruct. You can definitely see well with this. I'm going to do my best to not shake this thing around a whole lot. I'm going to go down to 16 power. So at 16 power, when I'm looking at the reticle, this is the most ideal setting for me. Whether I'm shooting NRL 22, PRS, NRL rifle, centerfire, or on this pellet rifle here, I think the reticle makes the most sense. I think the size and proportionality of your holdovers and the stadia, it all fits really good. So this is my favorite magnification to shoot on. I get a great balance of light, The image, the reticle, field of view, all of that seems really, really good at 16 power. I would say it's optimized. The optic seems optimized right around here. 16, maybe 18 power is excellent. Really superb for whether I'm shooting at an animal, a critter that's an extended range, or if I'm actually shooting at maybe a clay pigeon at 1,000 yards. All of this is pretty much what I'm looking for. And I'm so happy that this reticle ended up being one of my favorites. I was so skeptical at first, but it did win me over, and it's very functional. So I probably can't say enough about the reticle. I don't want to go on and on about this, but I'm going to tell you it makes sense. It worked really well for me. And the most important part, the reticle is not blurry or distorted in those portions of the glass. And I have run this to max magnification and max elevation at the same time, and the image still looked perfect. Well, perfect is really subjective. It looked exactly as I thought it should look at the price point. That's probably a more honest way of saying it, and I was really pleased with it. So great job, Riton. I think the reticle in this was a home run. I didn't expect it, and I'm convinced now. One more thing I almost forgot to say. The fact that this goes to 12 mils is a big deal to me. I really like that, especially for 308 shooters and people who are not using something quite to the ballistic coefficient of those 6.5 bullets, and you're in a slower 30 caliber, something in that range. I just like having more holdover, and when the glass, is sufficient and it can hold that reticle down further without distortion, without problems, and visibility is still good. It's not too busy of a type of reticle. It's not like an H59 or something. I think they should do it, and so I'm really glad to see this to 12. The glass is good enough. They could have gone to 20. Definitely could have gone to 20, but they wouldn't need to, and I think that would hurt the low-end magnification of the optic because, again, the way that they've set this up with reticle and those fat lines on the horizontal and the very, very bottom there, it just wouldn't match up the same if they did 20 mils. So I understand why they didn't, but at least there's 12, and I'm really happy to see there's 12. Especially for you airgun guys, you're going to find most of your practical shooting ranges for holdovers, even if you're shooting extended ranges like me, most of your practical distances, you can quickly get a holdover and get a precise holdover because of the reticle within 12 mils. If you're shooting 100, 125, maybe 150 yards, you can get it with most of those pellet rifles. PCP guys, this is an excellent optic for those higher end PCP builds. For the Springer, I'm elated that it's actually held up for this first 500 rounds, and the reticle itself has been really conducive to airgun shooting, which is another win for me. I understand the camera didn't make this look too pretty, but I know I have to take at least a few shots here just so you can see kind of what it's like for me being behind the gun. Again, I'm at about 50 yards, just a hair past. Using a Wyrow HW97, and I'm using H&N field target or something. I think there's 7-ish grain pellet. So as you can see there, 4 in about a 1/4 inch, and I did have a flyer to the left. I don't know what happened with that one. I must have had a bad trigger press. It was not the fault of the optic or the rifle. It was probably just me. Not even the pellet. I'm sure the pellet was fine. So that's pretty good if you're shooting about 1/4 inch groups at 50-ish yards. You're looking at half MOA. So very happy with the rifle, pellet, and especially optic performance. That center dot and the chevron have a lot to do with it. Of course, the clarity of glass backed it up.